Recording now.
Um, yeah, hi. Ko kui ingoa ko Sione Teumohenga. I'm not like fluent in Tongan. So
Neither are
um,
we.
yeah, I need to like attend some of these meetings. um, but yeah, I'm a music producer and artist based on Ghana land in Adelaide, Australia. Um, uh, yeah, I primarily work under the name LonelySpeck, which I've been doing for about sort of since like 2013, 2014. I kind of started this project. Um, and yeah, in that time, I've released 3 EPs and like collaborated with a bunch of artists. And at the moment, I'm like kind of finalizing work on my first album, like full length album. So yeah. Yeah, and aside from that, I guess I have like a lot of different interests. Like I do visual work as well. I do the visuals for my music, and a bit of writing. And I'm like a big nerd for like Pacific history and Tongan history and linguistics and that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'll talk a little bit about how I kind of got into music and like my connection to Tonga growing up and how that's developed over the years and that kind of thing. So yeah, my dad is Tongan, my mum is Palangi. Um, and I was born here in Adelaide and pretty much mostly raised here. Um, and yeah, so my parents split when I was pretty young. So and I lived with my mom. So I didn't have a lot of connection to um, Tonga and like the culture other than just kind of my little bit of contact with my dad when I was a kid. So, and Adelaide doesn't have much of a Tongan community. So it's like very small here. It's like a small city, I guess. So yeah, I think growing up and really into my kind of early 20s, like I didn't really have a great sense of like what my Tongan identity meant. Um, and I understood myself to be Tongan, but I didn't really know what that meant, like in a deeper sense, I guess. And yeah, so I don't know whether to go into like Tongan stuff or like music stuff first. um, uh, but yeah, I grew up, I was a really creative kid. I was always like drawing, and I didn't really consider myself musical as a kid, which is funny because it's like my whole life now. um, but yeah, I gravitated towards it, I think, in just like looking back, it feels like inevitable that I ended up doing music because I was always kind of gravitating towards it, even when I felt like it wasn't like formally for me or something. Because I've never learned to read music and I could never get the hang of that kind of side of music. But yeah, when I was like 15, I just picked up guitar, um, and just instantly really took to it and was just like obsessed with it. And then a couple of years after that, I um, I just had like such an urge to record music, um, and like create songs. And I'd been like kind of dabbling on the computer, making some things, but like I remember I had like an English presentation at school or something, and like I'd borrowed a friend's like headset mic um, to record the presentation. But like I ended up using that to record some songs on the guitar as well. And that was like my start of like recording things and like tracking parts and stuff like that. And I was just like addicted to it from the start.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, I started off making these kind of like rock songs. Like I was really into like, it was like the time of emo and like that kind of era was big for me. And yeah, I just kind of made loads of songs. and I guess through that I kind of gradually taught myself to produce, and then kind of a few years later my taste started to expand a lot more, and I got into more electronic music and really everything that I'd never explored, like even like super poppy stuff and like more like different types of hip hop and R&B um and like more experimental things as well. Um and yeah, so that's kind of the basis of where Lonely Speck came from, I guess, was when I was also playing in a band with my high school friends, but I think I realized that that process of like doing it myself, like, and kind of creating these worlds as a solo thing was like what I was really passionate about. Um, so yeah, and then I guess it was like around 2015 that I first went to Tonga. Um, and that was like a really like huge like transformative thing for me, like in terms of just everything kind of fit into place, like these missing pieces of my identity, I think. And I just remember feeling like all this like diaspora stuff of like, oh, am I really Tongan and do I fit in, and am I like all of that kind of stuff went away a little bit, and it was just kind of like, okay, I'm here, and like my family here and they know who I am and they love me. It's just like that simple kind of thing. um and yeah, so that had a really it was also like at that time I was in a very kind of um difficult place in terms of my whole identity and everything, and just kind of figuring out who I am. um so yeah, it was a really kind of vital thing for me, I think, to happen at that time. um and yeah, and then kind of after that I decided the next time I went to Tonga I wanted to be able to speak Tongan. So I kind of started putting more effort into learning Tongan. And I didn't really have like any resources back then. I was just like collecting stuff off the internet and like, but I have this Tongan, Tongan grammar book um, that I think was given to my mum by my grandpa back when my parents were still together. Um, and so that was kind of my starting point. And it's like this super like dense, like um, kind of like linguistic style grammar that's like just not for beginners at all. But that kind of spurred me on to getting really into linguistics, because there was like these yeah, Churchwood, and yeah, there was like these tables in there that kind of compared the cognate words of like Tongan with like Samoan and Fijian and stuff, and I was just like whoa. Like there's these connections across like all these Pacific languages like that we can like look at. And then I just, that was kind of something that really drove like and kind of helped me discover my passion for um like both like the historical linguistics of the Pacific and also just the history in general, and like the movements and um the process of like comparative understanding of things and that stuff like that. Um, and yeah, I think it's like, it's always felt more like, even the more and more I follow those kind of passions, it feels like it's like a higher like purpose kind of guided thing. Like, and I didn't even believe in that kind of stuff before, but it just has that feeling to me. And like I would keep discovering these things that kind of really resonated with the way I work creatively, like just through these things. And like yeah, I I've just been kind of rambling a bit, but
No, you've been making perfect sense. And sorry, I just wanted to touch on one thing you said, like how
Mm,
you felt that things were falling into place once you took that trip to Tonga, right? And
mm,
that resonates deeply with me because I felt like you said, right, like the higher calling, right? Like the higher purpose. Like
mm,
I truly believe in it now that like reconnecting with the culture, um, and then also finding critical Tongan thinkers, right? Like
mm,
Tongan thinkers that push back on the official narrative, right? And just I can never say that I find these things by happenstance or by luck, right? Like I'm more and more every day believing that, the ancestors like this has been this is the culmination of something that's like millennia in the making, right? Like we're
mm,
part of a long line. And so just hearing you say, well, like all those hangups, right, of being a child of the diaspora, and like, am I enough? Am I Tongan enough? Am I not Tongan enough? Right? And just all that kind of being superseded, or like, that love you felt from those around you, just weighing more than that, So yeah, that's something that deeply resonated with me.
mm. Yeah, totally. And like, yeah, and yeah, I'm finding myself like talking about that more and more with people, which just makes it even more that feeling. Um,
Right.
I was even talking about it with my dad the other day. Um, but yeah, it's like I remember there was one thing that I kind of found just in the depths of like the internet researching, like going back even beyond Tongan history to kind of Austronesian history of like
Yeah.
um, the kind of going back beyond the Lapita ancestors and that kind of thing.
I fall
And there
down
was
rabbit
this,
holes
yeah, the
researching that
rabbit holes.
stuff.
Yeah. And there was this thing, I don't know if I could find it to bring it up, but it was like talking about what we can kind of understand about the original Austronesian peoples and like their culture based on like what we know about like comparing the languages and the cultures that are descendants of them today. And there
Mm,
was just like this thing about how um they held ancestry as really like important, and they kind of used metaphor or something to like um define their landscape and like
mm.
if that makes sense. And
Oh, it
um
does.
yeah, and
Lehaliaki
just
in
yeah,
Tongan.
and
Yeah.
yeah, just so much stuff that just kind of felt exactly like the way I work
Mm,
creatively. And I was just like, there's no way that it's like a coincidence that I'm like it's literally in me. It's like in
right.
us, like
Right.
in a
Right.
literal sense.
In a literal sense, yeah. Not in the
And it was just
abstract. It literally is in us.
yeah. Um, but yeah, I just and just so many things like the more I've gotten opportunities to work with more Pacifica artists and stuff like that. Like through doing Lonely Speck, like through following my passion, like has led
Yeah.
me to these things that feel so enriching.
Mm.
Um, yeah, it's felt like really I'm on the right path kind of thing.
Right? You kind
Um,
of feel like you're right where you're supposed to be, right?
mm,
Which is something sorry, I don't mean to keep making this about myself, but something I felt like, damn, I
mm,
was looking for a lot of my life, And then just
mm,
in that reconnecting with the culture, um, yeah, it's like epiphany after epiphany, right?
mm. Yeah, so what I was gonna, I might talk a bit about, I guess, how that those passions and stuff have kind of worked their way into the way I make music and that kind of thing,
Mm,
and the way I work creatively in general. Because I think like I don't know, I think there's kind of superficial ways that you can explore culture versus like ways of actually incorporating um, the actual kind of principles of the culture and like um, internalized things about it, as
right,
opposed to like as an like an aesthetic or whatever.
right,
Um, so I've really, and I think it partly probably comes also from the fact that I feel like I'm in two worlds or whatever. Like, I mean that kind of I have access to the culture, but I'm not like I don't consider myself an authority in any way. Like, so I'm like a student and um, yeah, like I'm learning and I'm just following my intuition, I guess, with a lot of things. And like, so um, I think for me, what has been something that's really inspired me creatively is like, um, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. um,
You're all good.
um, oh God,
What you were
I'm a
saying
bit
about
tired.
following your intuition, right? Like that's just
Mm,
reminding me of like the way the ancestors found their way across the Moana Nui, right? Like just like
mm.
they didn't have GPS anything, like they were using the stars, they were using the currents, you know, they were using the birds and like that intuitiveness, like we were talking about earlier, like it's just it's in us, right? Like so like yeah, that's what I was thinking about when you were talking about that. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, yeah, it's fine. Yeah, it's like really tapping into that intuition and like understanding like the relationship with the space and like the
Right,
environment.
right.
Um, yeah, I was gonna say like I don't know, my brain just like died when I was trying to make that point. But
No worries. If you wanted me to
um,
ask a question and maybe it could, you know, or if you want to just wait and remember it, it's all good.
oh yeah, so yeah, I was talking about like my kind of access to that and like I think like I kind of damn, I don't know why I can't explain it. um but yeah, I think it does also tie into that heliarchy thing of like
Hmm.
um well yeah, I guess that's an example of what I was trying to say is like rather than kind of adopting like superficial ideas about culture or whatever, I think I've gotten a lot more out of like kind of researching and like living things and experiencing like relationships um, and like developing relationships with other Pacifica people and
Yes.
community and that kind of thing, and using that kind of thing to drive my creative work. And I feel like that's what made like being a Tongan artist means to me, like as opposed to being like, oh, I made this like thing and it's like looks like a Tongan thing or whatever, as
Right.
opposed to like I've like um it's kind of like a more fundamental thing for me. I think I want it to like be the bedrock of like what I'm building off of,
Right.
to um yeah, to like be making stuff from a place where yeah, from that place where that stuff is informing it.
Right. Right. I think of
I
like
finally got there.
that was amazing. Or just how you're saying like the way that Tongan culture influences you, it's more of like in your principles and your values and the way that you carry
Mm,
yourself daily as opposed to like the outward facing, right? Like you look at your artwork and you listen to your music, you don't the first thing you're like, oh, this is a Tongan, like right? But it's like, but you're pushing those boundaries, like you're redefining what it is to be Tongan, right? Like so, it's I just think of like even our tribal patterns, right? They become commodified. Like you see it on everything
mm,
now, like or just like that romanticized version of who we are, right? As like, oh, hula dancers, you know, easygoing, you know, just like whereas I think you make a really beautiful mess of that, right? Like, and that it forces people to engage in it's like, what does it mean to be Tongan? And nobody has an authority on that, right? Um, it can mean it, not that it can mean anything, right? But it's just trying to redefine what it means. So I really appreciate that.
mm,
It's not just a superficial thing to you, you know. It's like it's in how you're moving, and how you're creating. So I totally resonate with that.
mm. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And like I think one thing that kind of helped me start to from that perspective was I worked with a Tongan artist from Sydney called Batai Talanoa. Um, and she's like an amazing like performance artist who's very I think she really does that with her work. Like she makes these kind of very modern like performance art pieces and like endurance works and this kind of stuff like that. But she kind of, as an artist, she kind of works from the traditional like Bunake kind of contexts and that kind of thing.
Wow.
And like I think she plans to move back to Tonga and like just live there and like do the
Become
stuff
a
there.
punake? Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. Um, yeah, and like I worked with her. I got asked to like kind of soundtrack a piece that she was working on a few years ago, and like um, that was just such a like wholesome experience working with her and like connecting over just kind of like the Tongan things that like are Tongan that like people don't necessarily talk about as Tongan and that kind of thing. And
Right.
like I remember we were kind of she was talking about some songs that I'd released and stuff. Um, and on my second EP, Lathe, which came out in 2017, that was the most recent one that had come out at that time. And there was a big theme on that of like kind of using the like a kind of merging of land and body as like a metaphor. And she was like, that's a really Tongan thing to like sing about. And I wasn't even thinking about that like when I made it, but I was like, oh. um, and there's and that kind of like tapped me into like, and those things like that kept on happening. And yeah, I was like, okay, maybe I am make like I don't have to be like it doesn't have to be like there's my Tongan self and then there's like my music self and stuff like that.
Right.
Like it can just be like all together and it can be like me without like me having to like make it a certain way or whatever.
Right.
And that was really inspiring for me. And then later I've there's like this kind of ongoing collaboration called Family, which is like led by a Papua New Guinean artist called Ripley Kavara. And and it's kind of like this massive Pacifica collaboration, just making music. And we've made some songs and we did like a performance in 2020. But yeah, that's been like similarly kind of enriching and just kind of forming those connections and like finding those things that all resonate with us as Pacifica people. Um, yeah, yeah.
Sorry, Sione, can I ask the names of the two artists you just mentioned? One was Dalmoy
Mm.
Beao, and one was Ripley Kavara.
Yeah, I can put them in the
Okay.
chat.
Oh, perfect.
Um,
Thank you so much. How did you connect it to Dalmoy Beao? Did they just reach out to you through the internet, or did you guys know
I
mutuals?
I don't actually remember how it happened. I think it might have been it must have been through mutuals.
Mm,
Um, yeah, because I think I'd done some like I was just starting to get back into kind of the art world, I guess, and I got
mm.
this like link up.
Yeah,
Um, um, yeah,
nice.
Sorry, is it okay if I kind of interject and just I,
yeah, no
I
worries.
I feel like I'm really quiet, but I have so many thoughts as you're speaking. Like I just feel like I'm sitting in so many. You're like really provoking a lot of thinking for me in regards to the connections with our culture and how that has like influenced the way that you create, which is such a major thing to like like as someone who grew up in the diaspora as well, like I can totally relate to those diasporic feelings of like not growing up in the islands, but I was also very like had a lot of access to the culture through my parents. But now as like a parent of, you know, I'm like, I wish my kids can know this like earlier. And like, you know, my daughter, she loves art. And I just want her to just have this also this like way of creating in a way that she doesn't have to be like, it has to be like a Tongan way or has, you know, it's just her way, which is ultimately Tongan because she's Tongan, right? So I just love this discussion of like the ways that you've been affirmed in just creating what you create, but in a way that you're like you're validated, you know, because you're Tongan. You know, it's just in you. And so I love that point that you're highlighting here in this talanoa. I don't really have anything to like add to or contribute to the conversation. It's just me like really in awe of like how you are like how you're navigating that space as someone in the diaspora, in the culture, with with what you create. So I just really love that. Thank you, Malo. Thank you, Sione, for that.
Thank you, Malo. Yeah, thank you. I was going to say something, but I think I forgot what it was. Like while you was talking,
Sorry.
I thought of something.
Sorry.
No, it's all right.
Thanks, Lilika. No, she. No, sorry. Go ahead, Jen.
I'm just looking at my little notes. Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, like, I think that idea of like it being Tongan because I am Tongan. I think it's like, yeah, it kind of, for me, like the thing that I feel like the thing that makes me like allowed to do that or like to say that is only if I kind of do the work of like upholding those connections to the culture and like things that like enrich the culture and like yeah, because I think like culture is something that you live, it's not something that you just like have necessarily, and I think it's something that you have to kind of give to.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can do it like, obviously I'm not in Tonga and there's like not a big Tongan community here, but I can just like do it in the ways that I can, kind of thing. Yeah, but yeah, that was just like my little thought on that. But yeah.
Yeah, Lilika put in the chat like a responsibility as well, and I feel that's
Yeah,
true, right?
responsibility is the word.
Like even in the space of Ofa Ki Tonga, right? Of trying to create a virtual space where Tongans all over the world can try to reconnect, right? And try to I don't like to use the word learning. I like to use the word remembering, right? Remembering their language and their culture. Um, and you talk about like uh, you know how like, well, there's this artist named Tevita Latu, right? And he's an artist in Tonga, and his stuff is what they call in the Western world very avant-garde, right? It's very much pushing the limits, pushing the edges, right? And I feel that's kind of similar to what you do sonically, right? And he gets so much pushback from people on the island for his stuff. They call it demonic, you know. They call it like all these things, you know. They even call him a deportee, right? Because they think he's a you know, but he was born and raised in Tonga. Like, it's just so we had a conversation, you know, and he was talking about how like his art is Tongan because he's Tongan, right? Like it doesn't have to look a certain way. Like there doesn't have to be a kupesi or like there doesn't have to be a thing in there for, you know, oh, that's Tongan, right? Because it's like, and then we think about like traditional Tongan art versus contemporary Tongan art, and you know, and then who's telling us that this isn't Tongan, right? And just those conversations, I think it's good for us to have. I think a lot of times, and maybe this is just me, Tongans have a tendency to try to make things good when there's really it's not all good, you know. So like not confrontational, but engaging in these tensions, right? I feel like
Mm.
that's a good thing.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that also makes me think of another thing that I think it's kind of related to this way of working is like when you said about it doesn't have to be a kupesi or whatever, like um I kind of try to think about like, you know, like there's a kupesi and there's our like ngatu patterns and stuff like that. But it's like why do we have those patterns? Like what's
Mm,
driving that? Like, and like I think learning about the why of those like processes can help you like find a why coming from that place for like your context.
right.
And I feel like that for me is like maybe a kind of less superficial way of engaging with those things. And it's not to say obviously that like kupesi is superficial, because it's not,
Right. It's
but it's like
beautiful. Exactly. Right.
it's like it's for a specific context. And I feel like if you were just
Exactly.
like if I was to make like completely authentically traditional Tongan art like here in Adelaide, Australia in like 2022, like it would feel kind of, it's like removed from the context that makes it.
Mm,
So like, but I can like learn from, you know, the context that those artists have worked from, and like um apply that kind of those principles and that understanding to my own situation.
mm,
Yeah.
I think that also, I'm just thinking as you're talking, that also like really how do you say, like affirms the idea that of how fluid our we are as Pacific people and just like oceanic people, like the fluidity of like being able to like go out and like branch out into these totally new venues, but really it's like it's not really that new, because when we keep the principles like you say, or the foundation of it all, like you can literally do anything. So I just
Mm.
love that idea of like still being open and fluid to like when it comes to creating things, and like if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And it like goes full circle as well, because then it's
Right,
like
right.
these
Exactly.
things, like when I said like people were saying that's a Tongan thing to do, and it's
Yeah,
like you don't realize and stuff.
exactly.
Yeah. Um, yeah. Should I talk a bit about like creative process stuff? Or did you want to just ask questions about that maybe?
Oh, Luciola has a, did you
Oh,
want
yeah.
to say something, Luciola?
Yeah, it kind of relates to like, yeah, creative processes, I guess, and kind of like connecting to like all the stuff that we're talking to about right now. Because I'm just thinking about how, yeah, like there's like the super traditional Tongan arts, or like idea of what is being Tongan, like, you know, kupesi and like old school stuff. I don't know how to say what it is exactly. And then like um yeah, like modern day, like what people believe is to be Tongan, like I'd really like to know like um just like your thoughts on that, because like, yeah, like even within the music space we kind of consider Tongan music or even island music to be like a very specific sound, or
mm,
like pretty much just reggae these days. Like that's like what people like, if it's reggae it's like a Tongan song or it's a Polynesian song. But like I'm really interested in like yeah, just like your just like you being who you are like as a Tongan, because like it doesn't fit that. But like not to say like you're not, you're out of here, because I really relate to it, because like I grew up with like rock music, and that's not something
Mm.
that's considered like Tongan. So I always felt like, oh, what I'm listening to isn't connected to the culture, and it's like disconnecting me. And like I'd really like to know like how you connect the way you express yourself and like the things that you're interested to the culture, and or like even how it doesn't connect to it. I don't know, just like just want to know more about that stuff.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I grew up with rock music too. But yeah, I think like, I don't know, it's a complicated thing. There's a lot of things that have like um influenced me in that way, I guess. Like, I mean, growing up, I didn't have like the Tongan, and I also like, I remember when I was kind of younger and I was getting into music and I was into like rock and stuff, and I would see like Polynesian artists on like Australian Idol and stuff like that. And just like in the media, and they would always be singing R&B and stuff, and I wasn't into that at the time. So I didn't really feel a way to connect to like the Tongan artists that I saw in that sense. So that was kind of another barrier to me, like relating to my people when I was younger. But there is like, I remember, I think the first like significant Polynesian like rock artist, or like Pacific rock artist that I saw is there's a band from Australia called Gang of Youths, and they have a Samoan lead singer, and their guitarist, who's now left, was Fijian, and they just played like the most like, well, they're still around. They play like the most like just awesome, like really anthemic, like atmospheric like rock music, and it's just like fully like this like triumphant emotional kind of sound, and I was they're really good. And I actually became kind of friends with the singer David Leo Pepe, and yeah, we've talked about that, like how just this kind of identity stuff of like being, yeah, just like not fitting, not feeling like you have to fit a mold or whatever. But yeah, I'm not sure exactly where I was going now. Yeah, that's just like one of my experiences with that kind of thing. And like, I guess with like my creative process, oh, I lost my train of thought again. um, yeah, feel
So
free to
like,
like,
yeah, go ahead and let me know if you want me to go ahead and start firing off some questions, you know. Uh, yeah, I guess
there's
maybe I'll throw.
definitely, yeah, I think
Yeah, go
there's
ahead.
like, if we keep talking about creative stuff, process
Right,
stuff, that will
right.
be like, you know, it's the stuff. Yeah.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah, so I was listening, I was reading an interview that you did with Pigeons and Planes in Complex in 2019, and a line that really stood out to me in there was you talked about falling in love with the process of recording and producing music, right? And then there was also a tweet that you sent not too long ago, which is, I'm quoting here: "What if I'm not a perfectionist? I'm just doing stuff that objectively takes a lot of time and effort." And that to me was just like, that's it right there. It's just like, the concept of a perfectionist, like the negative concept of it, right? And that being a bad thing, as opposed to giving your work the respect it, in the time and space that you give it, right? Um, in the interview they talk about how your EPs, there's a space, like there's a significant space between each one, right? And I feel like that is because of the process, where you're deliberate and you're intentional in the time that you give to it, right? And that makes me think of the ancestors' relationship, right? In understanding time and the concept of time, like before contact with the Europeans. And yeah, I was just wondering if you could just give us like a little sneak peek into like your process, if there even is a process, or if it's just you just go in and just just what's there is there. And then also too, like how do you navigate the music industry, right? Which I'm not a musician, but from what I've heard, it can be pretty cutthroat, right? So like how do you navigate a space that might not allow proper space and time for you to create, right? While also staying true to your process. Does that question make sense?
Yeah. Um, yeah, like yeah, I find it's really important to me to be able to just kind of spend that very intentional time like working on things. They're not like that's when I get the most out of it, is when I'm able to like get into the details and
Mm,
really just make it like make the work as good as it can be, kind of thing.
mm.
um and like some people would call it perfectionism, but to me it's just like um I don't know, it's just like going all the way, like
Yeah.
um
Not selling yourself short, right? You're not selling your art short. Like,
yeah, it's like I know I can get it to this level of quality or whatever, so I'm gonna
right.
um yeah. And another thing I was going to say that I just thought of with like the time thing is like when I went to Tonga, I felt like the time I like finally felt like the world was in like my time.
Right.
Like
Like it
when I
just
went to
lined up,
Tonga,
right?
yeah, I was like, like why can't like be like this in Australia?
And
Um,
there's a common notion that like people say like, oh, it's so slow in Tonga, right? And it's just like, or maybe that's how time should be, you know, like,
yeah,
and maybe we're
yeah.
just too fast. Like, I don't know.
Mm. Um, but yeah, yeah, it's really important to me to like spend that time and to give that attention to like the craft of it, I guess. um and I guess with like creative process stuff, like part of the reason it takes so long is because I like to like use like research and that kind of thing to like um to I guess like build out the kind of world that I'm creating in a release or whatever. um so I will like be reading loads of stuff, and like my interest in like linguistics and stuff ties into that, and like um yeah, and that's kind of how I like work out lyrics and that kind of thing. And because
Mm,
I don't know, I just like really love words and
right.
language, and um I'll just kind of, it takes me forever to write lyrics and to come up with song titles and stuff, because
Yeah.
they'll be like, it has to have like the exact
Mm,
meaning that I'm trying to convey. And I'm not happy with it if it's like a little bit off or whatever.
right. Right.
But yeah, I think over time there's been kind of a stronger Tongan element to that process. um and like I've been trying to make a conscious effort to like for a few years now. It kind of started with Abyssal Body, I think. um like making a conscious effort to draw on like Tongan motifs and metaphors and stuff, as opposed to like traditional Western motifs. And like I feel like it's very common um in kind of, probably I guess in just music in general. I think especially in like my genre and stuff, like people are drawing on like Christian themes, and um even in like a kind of critical way or whatever, but like it's
Right.
still like this Western perspective and like Western traditions and stuff that it's drawing on, like Greek stuff and whatever.
Mm.
And I was like, what if I just like intentionally only use Tongan reference points for my stuff? Like um and it doesn't necessarily mean I'm like singing about specific Tongan things or whatever, but it's just kind of using that yeah, that reference point to like um for like metaphors and that kind of thing, and like just different standards of metaphor. And yeah, it's tricky to explain, but yeah. And I the album that I'm working on right now, I've kind of gone more into that. Because there was, I think Abyssal Body was, there was still a kind of like element of um incorporating like medieval European aesthetics and stuff, which was
Right.
kind of
Right.
um which like that was intentional. but it was kind of this time I feel like I've left that element behind and just kept like the Pacific stuff.
I love
um,
that.
yeah.
Looks like Lilika has her hand raised.
No, yeah, I just like appreciate you sort of bringing in the time concept to your creative process. Like time, we usually talk a lot about like how time is perceived in like Pacific or Tongan and indigenous spaces, and that it takes so long to like get things across. Like just even like metaphors alone, it's just there's just time. It takes time to like say all these things, or even to like for like to convey a message. It takes a lot of time, and just appreciate you saying how you just like to take your time in your creative process, because you know that you can get it to be, you know, at this level. Like that's such a, I feel like, again, just going back to that connection to the way that we function as Pacific people or as indigenous people, of like using that concept of time, and that like it is very opposite from, like you said, like Western, like that's such a capitalist thing of like getting things done, like let's get this done so we can get this. But it's just like we want to take our time, we want to make sure it's like good quality. So sorry, you mentioned something about how you love to use words and you love to, you know, play with words, and I guess my question is how you came to your name, to your artist name, Lonely Speck. How did that come about?
Yeah, well, that's actually it comes from a quote by Carl Sagan, the like astronomer, kind of a popular scientist guy in like, I guess like the 70s through to the 90s. I was like, well, I still am like a huge fan of his stuff. And I've always been like really into space and that kind of thing. So that like Lonely Speck had just been a name that I had used on some like blogs and stuff, but I decided to apply it to the project. But yeah, it like refers to I think it's the Voyager probe. When that was like leaving the solar system, Carl Sagan asked them to like turn the camera around and take a photo of the Earth from that distance, and it's just like this like single pixel that they called pale blue dot. And then Carl Sagan had this like really beautiful little speech, I guess, about it, about how like, you know, like everything that's ever happened on that pixel. Like everyone that's ever lived, every like king and like every war and that kind of thing. And he referred it to I think a lonely speck in the great enveloping cosmic dark. um yeah, but yeah, I think I feel like it's a little bit of a corny name, but I also love it still. So
No, I love it. And I was just thinking that if we got like a native speaker to even translate that to Tongan, it'd be so beautiful.
Oh my god.
So I don't know what it is. Don't ask me, but I just know, like, just thinking of how that would translate to like our language. I think it would be so, with the context that you shared about it being like relatable to like space. I think it would be so beautiful.
Totally.
I know Dr. Tevita Kaili knows a little bit about like astrology from a Tongan perspective. So yeah, I definitely love to get you in contact with Dr. Kaili because that'd be amazing,
I
right?
love his work so much. He's like
Yeah,
such a huge
he's
inspiration.
uh for so many of us, right? Like just such a huge inspiration. We've actually had him on here before, so uh
I was just watching a bit of his talk before. I'm gonna watch the
oh
rest of it.
nice. Hopefully we can have him back on, and hopefully we can have you back on after you release your album. You know, that'd be really
I'd love
cool.
to.
But yes, definitely. But just thinking of like your passion for all things space related, right? And then also like your influence like that derived from the Tongan culture and like writing these questions, I was thinking, right, of two bodies. One like the body of water, right? That is our mother, Moana Nui. And then the other is like the celestial bodies, right? That the wayfinding ancestors used to navigate. I was just wondering if you make any of those connections in your work, or if those influence you in any way, or anything you wanted to say about that.
Yeah, totally. I think that kind of started with for me, there's like a very direct thing that's like that um I released a song called Mantle in like I think the start of 2018. And it was kind of like a B-side from the EP that I released before that. But I made a video for it where there's like, the idea was that it's a literal celestial body. Like it was like a kind of human shape, or like a planet shaped like a human,
Right.
kind of undergoing a sort of geological metamorphosis with like lava and stuff in like while floating in space. And that, I think that's what Latai was referencing when she said like about how the body and land, or body and
Mm.
earth thing is like a very Tongan concept. Um, so yeah, that was kind of like a key thing in exploring that kind of thing for me. But I've always been, at least as long as I've been doing this project, I've been really drawn to metaphors about both nature and the body.
Yeah.
And I think I just like everything I write is like in that, uses those kind of metaphors in some way.
Right.
And yeah, and like with Abyssal Body, the EP,
Yes.
that idea kind of came from like, I was one of the first kind of conceptual points I started with when like working on that EP was like the abyssal plane at the bottom of the ocean.
Mm.
And I kind of drew an analogy to the astral plane. And I was like, well, there's the astral body, and then there's can be the abyssal body that inhabits like this abyssal plane. And it's like, it's the ocean one is like plane as in like AIN, like a plane, not as
Oh,
in, but it's like,
the
so it's kind of like a,
wordplay. You see the
yeah,
wordplay that Lely actually
um,
there.
yeah, yeah. um, and yeah, I kind of, the whole starting point for that EP in that sense was like, I was kind of imagining a, it's really about the space between, and like kind of my journey.
The space
um,
between. Oh man.
yeah, and it's kind of a metaphor for my journey from not understanding myself, also in terms of like gender and all that kind of thing,
Mm.
um, to kind of finding a place of understanding myself, or at least like seeking that, and like trusting that I'll find it. Um, so the abyssal body kind of represents that place of like unknowing and like not knowing, just this kind of placeless,
Mm.
like substanceless body or something. And I just imagine this kind of being at the bottom of the ocean, at the farthest place you could find between like land.
Right.
And I had like the way I was thinking about land was in the context of Bonua, like um, as in like the land and the people,
And
and
the
like
people.
um, so that's kind
I
of how
love
I was
that.
thinking about that. And then like this EP kind of tells the story of, in a very abstract way, but like it kind of tells
Right.
the story of this being kind of chasing this kind of future self, idealized being up back up to the surface. Um, and then it kind of ends, actually it ends on a, in the concept of, and the narrative, it ends with the being finally making its way onto land. And then like I used a sample that I recorded in Tonga of like just like my family milling about, like my dad chopping wood and stuff, and it's just like very quietly in the background, but it was kind of like um all the ambience before that had been like this deep sea kind of stuff. So that was kind of my, yeah. And I think,
That's
yeah, it's probably like not super audible to anyone but me, but yeah.
that's all that matters, right? No, I'm just kidding.
Well, and I think I
um,
also like, there's also like a really deep background sample of like um they were in like one of the resorts, there was like this song playing, this Tongan song. It just sounded so beautiful to me, and I recorded it on my phone and I put that in the song as well.
I love how you took those snapshots of your visit, right? And then
Mm,
incorporated it into the music. And though somebody might not understand the context, no, the creator knows it's there, right? So that sentiment, that's amazing. You're saying, the space between, are you familiar with the concept of Tava, like space and time? Like I know Kaili talks
mm,
about it a lot. That's his, and when you were talking about that, I just and then you were talking about like, from moving from water to land, right? You may think of the ancestors, right? When they were traversing Mauna
mm,
Nui, like, and when they transformed from seafaring people to land-based people, right? And even that transformation, and then also too, what you talk about for Noah being the land and the people, right? It makes me think of this one of these tr one of these myths and stuff that I was reading in Church and State in Tonga, and it talks about how like commoners um one interpretation of it was commoners didn't go to Pulotu, right? They were
mm,
called Kainangai Fonua, like they're eaters of the earth, and that they literally return back and eat the earth, right? And like that speaks to so many things, right? The class divisions in Tonga, right? It speaks to like the commoner, right? And just I don't know
mm,
if you see this too, but looking at Tongan history, I feel like there's a huge part missing, right? And it's from the vantage point
mm.
of the commoner. Um,
Yeah, totally.
but sorry, I kind of went off track there, but back to your 2019 EP, Abyssal Bodies. That's just such a beautiful concept, right? I'll just read the quote here from the article if it's okay, because they were asking you to talk about the cover art, and then you kind of gave a background of the rough story, the storyline behind Abyssal Bodies, and it was, in some ways, it's a reference to medieval cosmologies and the diagrams they have of the Earth in the center of the universe. I was imagining my own version of that, where the abyss is in the center. This signifies the bottom of the ocean because the EP represents a sort of journey from the bottom of the ocean to land. And I just thought that was so poignant. And I was going to ask you, to go into it, but you kind of just did. So, yeah. What are these influences going to be in your next album, or can you not tell us that yet? Or
Yeah, the album is almost a bit of a sequel to Abyssal Body.
Mm,
Um, so it's kind of continuing the journey. I feel like with um Abyssal Body was kind of about this um dynamic between like an idealized self and like um present self, I guess.
mm,
But with this one, I felt like I wanted to be a lot more, take a more like grounded kind of approach. And I mean, it's become very fantastical, but I wanted to like start from this place of kind of turning that journey on its head of Abyssal Body. And like, so it starts off like as though kind of, I imagined Abyssal Body kind of ending with this, like there's the song My Angel Goes Before Me, and the angel
mhm,
like represents the idealized like future self that kind of um and that itself was kind of a mantra for like, I guess like believing that you have this idealized future self that you're going to become, and like you're going to, and like trusting in that, um which is, that's still important to me, but like I wanted to kind of um imagine it, so this album kind of starts off, I won't like, I won't give spoilers, but the album I'm imagining kind of starts off like with that angel kind of reaching the surface, and then once it like exits the water, it's kind of just this like useless being that's just kind of has to undergo its own kind of change, and like
mm,
um and then there's kind of a relationship, there's kind of a new dynamic between, I guess I've kind of personified time,
mm.
and like I want to kind of portray it as a kind of a like Polynesian ritualistic like leader. Um
Oh,
yeah, I'm still like developing visuals and stuff. But
right, right.
yeah, I want it to be about this kind of dynamic between time and the spirit of the angel, and then like the body of the angel, which is kind of left behind to decay under the hands of time, which is kind of gonna, yeah.
You're blowing my mind right now. I can't wait for the album. Oh man,
It's almost done.
nice, nice. Um, and then also like to your latest track, Meadow Flake. I was looking at the cover art and I was like, man, the symmetrical lines kind of remind me of like, the straight lines in like say a Kupesi, or like,
Mm.
the repetition, but also it wasn't. It was also very different from that, right? So I was just wondering if you can give us a little insight into the single Meadow Flake, because that came out 2022, right? That's your latest
Mm.
single.
Yeah, that came out just a couple of weeks ago.
Is that going to be on the album?
No, that one's like kind
Okay,
of a part of a standalone collaboration with these two other
gotcha.
artists that are also on my
Oh,
label. Um,
okay.
so yeah, that one is, I kind of like produced the original beat, and then we all kind of produced it up, and we
Mm,
all sang parts on it and stuff. And then we have like an EP coming as well, like a little, we've written some
nice.
songs. Yeah, it's
Is
kind of
is it
like a,
difficult? Go ahead,
oh
sorry.
sorry, um I forgot what I was gonna say. You go ahead.
I'm sorry. I've
No, it's all right. Yeah, it wasn't
I've
important.
interrupted your train of thought like 3 times today. I'm
No,
so
no,
sorry
no,
for
it's
that.
totally fine. I just have like, my brain isn't working today.
Uh, now I forgot what I was gonna ask.
I think you might have been gonna ask, like, is it difficult like collaborating or something like
Oh
that?
yes. Is it difficult to co-produce? Like because as an individual artist, where you have complete creative control, which I feel I like that, right? Whereas co-producing, can that be hard at times?
Um, it's definitely something I've had to like really learn over the years, because I'm a very like, I'm a pretty like I just like to do things myself. Like I'm a very introverted person.
Same.
Um, and um, so yeah, and I think it's also finding the right people to collaborate with as well is a big part of
Mm,
it. Because every collaboration is really different, and you just kind of have to find the right people where you can like be yourself without changing yourself to fit the collaboration.
right.
At least for me, I mean, some people are really good at that and like doing that, but that's not for me. So I like to, yeah, like we're very much the three of us, well, it's like four of us, like the three artists. um, we're like on the same wavelength with influences and
Mm,
stuff. So yeah.
the trust is there, huh? You guys, yeah.
Mm.
Right on. I just wanted to open up the space if anybody had any questions for Sione. I feel like I'm hogging up all the time right now, but it's like this is my first time meeting Sione and I had so many questions. Luciola has her hand raised.
Um, I had a question about that playlist you made, the Pacifica
Oh yeah.
Futurism. I love the cover art, first of all. Like I really want to know like the process of making that, and just like more about like your visual style, like what inspires you, and what I know like every art piece is like a different thing that you want to convey, but like I'd like to know like the usual things you'd like to emit or convey with your art visually. And yeah, I'd just like to know like also like how would you define like Pacific futurism too?
Mm. Yeah, so um, yeah, I made this playlist called Pacifica Futurism, where I, over the course of like several months, I like kind of just trolled the internet looking for Pacifica artists who were kind of like out of the box, I guess, and like left field kind of artists doing things that I thought were really fresh and like paving new ways for Pacific artists. Um, uh, yeah, and I made like this cover art for it where it's like a Tongan Kalia like ship, but it's like in a spaceship form, like flying through space. um, and yeah, I made that in Blender, which is like 3D software, but it's like kind of an industry standard at this point, quality, but it's free, which is amazing. Um, And I started learning that in 2016, I think. I just kind of like, I had a lot of time that year to just like do stuff on the computer. So I just did loads of tutorials for Blender. And yeah, I learned that, and I've made most of my visuals and stuff with that since then. Yeah. But yeah, I had like a visual arts background. Like I was always drawing when I was growing up, and then when I left school, I studied visual art. And that was kind of before I had decided music was what I really wanted to focus on. Yeah, I majored in drawing, and yeah, and then I kind of started music, and I didn't really do much visual stuff for a few years until I got back into it with Blender and 3D things. And yeah, I'm like really into like visual effects and just studying, and like filmmaking and studying that kind of stuff. I'd love to make a film one day, or like work in film in some capacity. I think that's, I'm kind with like when I make videos and stuff, I'm basically trying to live that dream on like an extremely limited budget. But yeah.
Oh, I don't know if you saw the question Akolea dropped in the chat.
Yeah, I've just seen it.
Okay,
I just have water.
that's a great question, by the way.
Yeah, I'm obsessed with linguistics. So yeah, I kind of found linguistics through reading that Churchwood grammar book. And I just became really like so fascinated, and it's still just like, it's just that like that thing for me that just like is never not interesting to me. Like yeah, the Austronesian connection, it's amazing. And just like the way we can kind of trace history through language and comparing languages and stuff like that, and like the way languages change and things like that. Like I'm at the point where I can like see, I don't know if you guys do this or anyone else does this, but like you like see like a word in Hawaiian or Samoan or something, and it's like
All the
in
time.
Tongan, and it's like in Tongan that like I don't know, like a word like I don't know, like kanaka in Hawaiian is like tangata in Tongan, because like
Right.
their T's changed to K and their na sound changed to N, and that kind of thing. And it's just like these regular sound changes. You can like track like the whole, yeah, Mauna. You can track kind of so much history through them, and you can track like where people were and like influences of things like that just through like these language changes. And like there's like fascinating like outliers and things like that. And what was that? Oh yeah, a really good one is like Hawaii and Savaii and Hawaii are all like the same word. And I think that supposedly, or at least I read a paper that draws a pretty convincing connection to Ho'eki in Tongan. And yeah, there's so many, I could like literally go on forever. But yeah, I kind of like, for me, like the way it kind of goes into my creative practice is like, I'll often kind of research those things, and you can kind of explore, or another amazing resource is there's this thing called Polex, or the Polynesian Lexicon project, which is like basically a catalog of like all these different records of Polynesian languages and languages related to Polynesia, like Fijian and stuff. And it just kind of tracks the cognates in the languages. So you can compare like sound changes. I guess it's like a resource for linguists. But yeah, there's just so much interesting stuff there. And like, I really like to, I feel like I discover new ways to explore metaphors from like looking at the way the words have changed in different languages, like to have different meanings and that kind of thing. Like, especially because I feel like there's a lot of, I feel like there's more similarities between all of the other Polynesian languages to each other versus them to Tongan. Because like Tongan's kind of on its own branch in the Polynesian tree. But yeah, there's just so much to explore, and I feel like it's just like this never-ending fascinating thing. Like I've got like all my little like side projects are just like linguistics related. I've got like spreadsheets and stuff like like tracking things. It's just so interesting to me. And yeah, and it naturally ties into like the material history of the Pacific and like the migration history and like legends and things like that. So it's just like kind of this, yeah, which is like a never-ending well of fascinating things.
A never-ending well, yeah, exactly, right. Like you said, like even me, like I don't get like I'm interested in linguistics, right? But just specifically like oceanic language. I could spend hours just like internet searching, like just looking for articles, papers written or just any type of text that'll and more often than not, I'll find something that I'll just be like, that'll blow my mind, right? Or that'll make a
Mm,
connection that I didn't see before.
mm.
Um, but yeah, we're coming up on to almost the end of it. We've been here for almost an hour and a half. So yeah, it's been really good
Oh, wow.
conversation. I just want to let if anybody had any other questions, um, just before we close the space, just so respects on his time and just actually I had one kind of nerdy question. What program do you use? Your DAW.
Oh, I produce in Ableton.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
when I started, I produced in this like very obscure program that no one's heard of called Linux Multimedia Studio. Um,
Uh,
it's a little bit like Fruity Loops,
okay, yeah, I'm familiar.
but
Yeah,
it's kind of like, it's free, which is why I downloaded it originally.
yeah,
And that's kind of what I
right,
learned to produce on.
right,
Um,
right,
but yeah.
right on.
Before everyone leaves, we usually take like a little picture, a little group picture after each Talanoa, if everyone's okay with that. So I just want to put that in before people start logging off. Um,
Definitely.
so I can take it. So I'm just gonna, for those who want to put your camera on, you don't have to. But if you want to be, if you want to show your face on the camera, go ahead. But I'll count down. All right, ready? Everyone good? Okay. 3, 2, 1. Cheese. All right.
Uh,
Thanks, everyone. And again, thank you, Sione, so much for
Yeah, thank you
coming
so
to
much for having
talk
me.
with us. I really want you to come back if you can, if you have
I'd love
time.
to.
And we
Yeah.
usually have like these, after we our usual OKT, we have like a lessoni portion where we
Mm.
like talk about, like go through a lesson in like a Tongan language lesson. And then after we like just talk story because we can talk
Mm.
story for hours here, but really
Yeah,
appreciate you.
I'd love to do that, honestly. I need like some consistency for my Tongan learning as well. So
join
yeah.
us on Thursdays.
It's
Yeah.
usually this time, every Thursday. So whenever you're free, please come join us in Talanoa and talk story with us.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Definitely. Definitely. And also thank you too to the first timers, or maybe they were here weeks previous, I didn't see them. Patrick, I know Patrick from way back. We grew up together, so it's really good to see Patrick here. And Ari too. Welcome, welcome. We're so happy whenever we see new
Yeah, I
faces.
recognized you as soon as I seen your face. I was like, I know him. I know him.
He said I know that mug. But yeah, no, just we really appreciate, just the consistency like Shana was saying, but yeah, Shana, just thank you so much for sharing your time and space. And yeah, sorry, I'm at a loss for words. It's just to finally meet you, and to finally hear you speak your story has just been deeply impactful. So thank you so much, and we
Yeah,
look forward to having you
thank you so
again.
much for having me and inviting me on and everything. It's like I'm honored. So
Yeah, we definitely got to do it again.
Hmm.
And
But
good
yeah,
luck with your new album and your upcoming work. We look forward to it. We're just as excited.
yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Ofatu.
I'll follow through
Ofatu,
everyone.
malapito.